and welcome to this Thursday, December 29th, special city council meeting. This meeting is called in accordance with section 3.07 of the Home Rule Charter and section 2.04.060 of the City Code for the purpose of considering the approval of audit for FY22. Madam Clerk, were the members notified of the call?
Yes, they were.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilwoman Marino. Present. Councilwoman Mazzulli.
Here.
Councilwoman Vargas. Councilwoman Jermaine. Councilman Donegan. Councilman Campiano.
Here.
Councilman Riley. Council President Ferry.
Here.
Council President Paplas.
Here, so we do have a quorum present. Thank you. We have one agenda item today. It was the approval of audit for FY 2022. To my understanding, the audit is still in process. So I'd like to open it up to Finance Director Zadelis for an update, and then we'll take any questions or comments from the council.
Council President, do we have an
Oh.
attorney? Do we need an attorney here?
Great question. We're supposed to have an attorney here. If there's no objection from any members of the council, I will continue. If there's an objection, we can call to try to get somebody on Zoom. It could take a few minutes to get going. We should have one. It is a special meeting, and I don't think we're gonna have the audit presented to us this evening. I don't see anybody here from Markham, so I'll leave it at the council's pleasure. If someone has an objection on continuing, we can try to get an attorney to Zoom in. Do I see an objection? I see none, so we will continue. Mr. Zadelis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and councilors, although the vast majority of the schedules that are a compilation of financial statements have been done, drafts have been sent over to review. The final document, the annual comprehensive final report, is not in a condition which can be released. There were some issues relative to the effect of the schedule of financial assistance, the CFER, which the auditors, in their opinion, and since they signed the letter, is holding up the issuance of the audit for this august body. Anticipating that, we have requested an extension of the Auditor General's office, a 30-day continuance for the submission of the city's financial report, as required by law, and initial granting of that extension has been given by the Auditor General.
Thank you, Mr. Zadelis. Any questions for Director Zadelis? Council Vice President Ferry.
I have a general question. I wasn't sure if it was going to be directed to the administration or to Mr. Zadelis, but as everyone received a very lengthy email letter that I received from Jim Wilkinson this week. I had asked him basically for a simple explanation as to why he could not be here tonight to give us the audit. And what proceeded was a 2-page letter that I forwarded to everyone. And then I actually emailed him back again and said, could you please translate that for me? So I want to ask you and Director Moretti to address that letter and explain to me exactly why the auditor is not standing there at that pulpit right now in simple terms, so we could understand this thoroughly as to why he's not standing there. What did he not have in his hands to finish the audit by the deadline? That's what I feel I owe the council and the audit committee an answer to that question as the finance chair and the audit chair.
Mr. Chairman, Counselor, The direct answer is a completed schedule of federal assistance. It's a report. It's called the A-133, which is, if you recall, the auditor, when he was here for the audit committee, said that's the second report that gets issued, the second audit, which has the March 31st deadline. That initial schedule is not completed as an adjunct, but it runs with the financial report. That is what, in Mr. Wilkinson's opinion, is the root cause of why the final schedule, the final audit report is not done.
So if you put yourself in his shoes, would you have been able to be here tonight to present the audit?
Mr. Wilkinson and I had a brief conversation today about the reliance of the CFA on the independent audit. They are linked, but they're two separate reports. I had a conversation. It was a chicken and egg quick conversation. You know, what comes first, the audit or the CFA? But I'm not the one that gives the attestation. So, you know, to answer your request, I don't know what I would do in his position. In my experience, I have had audits released before the complete A-133 audit has been completed. But as Mr. Wilkins said in his letter, that was before things like COVID money and ARPA. So I recognize his position, and due to the fact that those funds do flow through the general fund, I do recognize the position he's taking, sir.
I did a lot of reading, a lot of work, and spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. Okay. And you've only been on the job how long now?
7 weeks, sir.
7 weeks. I thought it was 3 months. Okay. 7 weeks. And prior to that, we had no finance director for a period of time. So I understand that there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that brought us to this point. But this is what I discovered by looking at the 2020 and 2021 audits, which were done by two different companies. In 2020, the audit was done by Blum Shapiro. And in 2021, it was done by Markham, who was doing this audit. And both audits had the same finding, which was pointed out to the city in reference to the schedule of federal financial assistance, which now includes COVID funds. To keep it simple, both auditors found that the city did not provide a complete and accurate schedule of expenditures of federal awards. And the city responded in 2020, stating that because of COVID, the departments had limited access to provide the financial director with all grant reimbursements and receipts for his review and reconciliation. The process was delayed and required additional time. Going forward, efforts are being made to resolve this finding. So it was kind of a serious thing, but it really wasn't. We were in the middle of COVID. The information couldn't be gathered, understood. So the answer was, we're working on it. We're going to make it better next time. So in 2021, the same finding happened. But this was a little more involved because it involved about $8 million of COVID money, which had to be accounted for. In 2021, the city responded with a letter to Markham saying that the corrective action plan letter was sent on August 29th to Markham. It said, in summary, the city would devote efforts and resources to enable the city to present accurately and timely the federal expenditure activity. So same problem, same promise. We're going to work on it. We're going to make it better. We're going to devote the time. We're going to get it done. And here we sit tonight for a third time with as I see it, it's the same exact problem. And I'm not pointing a finger at you. You've been on the job for 7 weeks. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I don't understand why we're sitting here. And it's the same thing that was pointed out 2 years in a row that's causing the audit not to be ready.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, if I could just go back to you, the second audit What was the date again, sir?
A letter was sent to Markham on August 29th, 2022.
Okay, so just prior to my arrival, it was noted that, and it was after the fiscal year had closed. I just want to put that in context. Now, upon my arrival, from someone who has, let's call it, extensive grant experience in a former life, realizing the importance in the reliance to get grants on the CFA, we've already started putting actual procedures. And one of the procedures is, as departments, back to the email of the other day, the decentralized process, that is being changed, that when grants are awarded, we're going to get notification. As drawdowns occur, we will get notification. We've started it already with the senior center. Tomorrow I'll be with the fire department, just walking them through. It's a good time with the fire department. They have a new chief doing grants. So already we are putting in procedures to take a decentralized process, which we currently have, and make it as centralized as we can.
Well, that was my next question. Are you, in fact, putting the procedures in order that,
Yep,
a year from now, we will not be sitting here on December 28th, which, by the way, I think we should change the date and move it up a month, so we don't have this problem again. We'll have to check and see how we can do that. But that was my next question. Are we going to have the procedures in place so that we're not sitting in this situation a year from now with the same question being asked, is why isn't this schedule ready? And why aren't we satisfied with the money because we're going from 7.9 million in COVID money alone, plus other grant money, to $19 million in COVID money, plus other grant money. And, we know that the federal government's going to have their eyes wide open to make sure that we did the right things with this money and we spent it properly and that we're reporting it accurately. So that was my next question. So I'm satisfied with your answer that you're working on it. And I have the faith that you're going to be able to pull that off.
through the chair to the council, back to your first recommendation question about moving, let's say, the audit committee forward. That is a great recommendation, because you'll get earlier information about where they are. You might even have two audit committees. Relative to your second comment, I will assure you, and from someone who's, like I said, in a former life, had issues with grants with some of our departments. We centralized that in the finance department, the finance side of it, not the program side of it. There is not the capacity here to do that. So as a stopgap measure, like I said, we're going to get, request that information as they're submitting it into the respective agencies. So I'll assure you that next year, or FY23, we will have those procedures in line with all the departments, sir.
All right, so what would your recommendation be with Markham as to getting them here to present the audit to us? Have you had a conversation with him? Do you know when he's going to be, when you're going to be ready, when he's going to be ready?
I can say we should be ready before the January 30th extension, but to be safe, whatever day, the days before the 30th, if there's a regular meeting of the council, bring them in at that meeting and not have a special meeting.
Yeah, just to add a point of information, Chair, once we're done having discussion, I'll probably ask for a motion to send this to the January 23rd full council meeting. So that way there's a process and the public and us can continue to follow the process of the audit.
Thank you very much. I know I'm not running the meeting, but does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, no, we're gonna ask for more questions. I see a lot of hands up, so I'm gonna go to Director Moretti. Just because in case the administration has anything else to add, and then we'll ask for more questions from or comments from council members.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a handle on this to concisely give you what was before, what happened now. If I have it right, again, I'm not firsthand party to it, but by speaking with Mr. Zidelis, by reviewing emails, et cetera, being involved, I'll say in the process over the last couple of weeks. I think the question would be, how come we're not hitting, we being collectively the auditors, the city, December 31st deadline? From what I'm told, in the past, as part of the audits that were submitted by the 31st, the reconciliations of those schedules regarding the CFRs were performed after the year end, but before the quote unquote single audit is done, which is the audit of the federal grants. This year, I guess, as part of the program, so that was part of the program apparently in the past. This year, the same thing. I was informed by Mrs. Idellis that the difference was on December 14th is when he was made aware that Markham required those schedules completed this year before the audit results, before the audit report is published. So I think that's one of the single things that is different, that there's a new process that was introduced in the middle of this month, from what I'm told. So I think that's a key point. The other point I do have to say is that you'll recall that Markham was signaling that they won't have the audit done earlier this month, that there was a meeting for the 19th of December scheduled, and that they said they won't be prepared for it. In fact, they won't be ready this month. So they knew in advance, frankly, that they wouldn't have the audit results completed. It came to bear. Then it was last week that we got word that they're not ready. They don't have the schedules. And also they also cited being short-staffed, whether by illness or vacations. And also they closed the office, I believe, this past week, because we've gotten some email replies. So I think there's some things on their end, logistics and support, that they were not able to get things done on their end as well. So I would say, I don't want to use the word springing it on us, but making us aware that those schedules needed to be done. With Mr. Igo actually on vacation for the latter half of the month, Mr. Zidell is just taking over, given an assignment that had not been asked of the audit at that timing in the past. So I just wanted to give some perspective as to say, why wasn't the audit wrapped up? At this point, I'm not aware, unless Mr. Zidelis has something else, I'm not aware of anything that the city needs to produce for the auditors. Is there anything remaining?
Reports, like statistics, but yeah, nothing substantial on the financial side.
Okay, so it's in their hands. So we cannot promise when the audit will be completed. That would have to be a question from Mr. Wilkinson.
He has everything he needs at this point?
Mr. Zidelis, want to speak to that? I believe.
Through the chair, I got an email this afternoon about some additional information. He's looking for the CFR about 4 o'clock and, tomorrow. Matter of fact, probably early next week, those answers will be supplied. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Director Moretti and Director Zadellis. Any other questions or comments from council members? Councilwoman Marino.
Thank you. With respect to the extension, if you could just inform us, when was the request made?
Through the chair, it's 6:20, roughly 2 hours ago, ma'am. Counselor. Approximately 2 hours, when we knew that, when I had a subsequent conversation earlier, I finally reached Mr. Wilkinson and asked him, was there any way the financial report would be ready for next Tuesday because of the holiday? The report isn't required until next Tuesday because of the New Year's Eve holiday. That's when it was made, the determination was made to ask for that extension.
Was it submitted in writing? Because I believe that's
Through the chair, to the counselor, yes, it was. I got it. It was a formal letter that was emailed. We got an initial review directly from them, and we should have the letter tomorrow.
So a verbal assurance.
Written
is provided.
assurance,
Okay,
that will be, they do those within writing the response granting it. So yes, it's a written email with the actual granting letter being hopefully received tomorrow. ma'am.
right. I understand it's that they will respond in writing. What I'm asking is, as we sit here now, the assurance that you were given from the Auditor General was a verbal assurance, or was there not one given? If I could finish, because I believe you said earlier, and maybe I misheard, that you were given the approval for the 30-day extension.
Through the chair, the request, the email response was that a letter granting the extension would be received tomorrow in email.
Thanks. And then another question I have is this schedule of the expenditures of federal awards, of CFA, as you call it, I believe you said the A-133. The city of Cranston is not new to being the receiver of federal grants. So while I understand tonight that there were, over the last two prior years, a request that this be provided, and it wasn't provided, and now here we are in the situation apparently again. My question is, prior to that time, it would seem logical that we did provide it and it wasn't an issue. And I know this predated your time, and maybe this is a question for the administration. I'm just unclear as to why there was a drop off in more recent times.
Take that one. No, yeah, if you don't mind. I can speculate, but the amount of work that goes into, because it is a decentralized process, trying to ensure that you're capturing all the grants, that the source of funds originate from the federal government that end up in the financials of the city of Cranston is, you might think it's a simple task. It's a difficult task because it also involves pass-through money through the state. So you're sitting there in trying to, hunt down every grant fund to report on the CFA, both direct aid, which is much easier to identify, but indirect grants coming through the state. So just from what I experienced this year, it's to ensure that you're capturing all grants and then tying out that the grant had been filed for timely by a department and the funds came in timely. I've learned is an extensive amount of work. So prior to my arrival, I can appreciate any omissions that may have happened just from what I've experienced this year.
And I appreciate that, but I guess what I'm really asking is, to put it in simple terms, it's definitely a complex task. I'm sure we all agree. But my question is, it is not a new task. We as a city would have had to have done this in prior years. And from what I'm hearing tonight, we did up until the last 2 years, and this year, I'm just wondering why there was a drop off. And again, that predated your time.
And I think the level of scrutinization rises with all the COVID money. So if I can just say, they were probably doing it, but the pass-through money through the state that may have ended up at the fire department, trying to identify those, I'm just projecting out what I'm going through now, may have been difficult. So the level of funding has increased the last 3 years, and I'm going to speculate those might have been the omissions of previous years.
I think maybe Mr. Moretti can be of assistance, sure.
If I can add that, I'll get the answer. I believe, I'd have to check. I've only been intimately involved the last couple of years. I don't think that this has been a change in the last 2 years. I think it's been consistent over the past, and it's now being addressed. So I don't think, I know the councilman went to the 2020 report, 2021, perhaps if we go to 19, 18, 17, and we could check that. Certainly Mr. Igo will know, so he's got some historical knowledge, so we could get back to you to see if there's been any drop off from the way it was been done. But I believe it's always been done, at least in the recent history, on a decentralized basis. The comment is to do things on a centralized basis. That's what Mr. Zidelis is going to be doing this year. But I don't think it was centralized, went decentralized under the Hopkins administration, and now we're trying to get it back. I think it was consistently, it was decentralized previously.
I
I could confirm that, but I know I'm not aware of Mike or Mr. Strong mentioning that they're making any changes. Though it could be, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's my point. I don't know, and that's why I'm asking the question. Yep,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilwoman Renzulli.
So this is a question either for our auditor or for Director Moretti. I'm not sure who, but is it not true that single audits I usually do 9 months after the organization's fiscal year end or 30 days after the auditor report is due? And that during COVID, OMB released, they gave extensions, 3 different extensions for fiscal year ending 2020 and 2021. So there's been extensions going down the road to get where we are now.
I'm sorry, that the March deadline is 9 months from June 30th. So yes, the single audit has always had that deadline. Last fiscal year, because of COVID, they did extend it, which was back to Councilman Ferry's statement that, the August of 2022's filing of the A-133 was, before the extension period had lapsed. So the direct answer is yes, 9 months is March.
So this wouldn't typically, what they're asking for now should normally be due when?
March. It's back to the March deadline, 9 months from the close of the fiscal year.
So I might be confused. So why do they need it now if you were to expect it to be doing it for March? So is it really us or them kind of thing?
They want assurances that they can reconcile back to our basic financial statements was the explanation given to me. But the actual A-133 report is not due until March. That's yes, ma'am.
Just for additional clarification, the single audit report is separate from the audit that we get presented. The reasoning for the fact that maybe they want to look at it is that what is on the SAFER report has to tie into the current audit report. In the past, if they felt comfortable with what they received, then the issuance of the audit would come out because they have to feel comfortable because they're attesting to what the information is. Now, the fact that the funds are larger and they want to make sure that it agrees to what's in the audit that they're going to release to us is the reason why they're probably looking at it a little bit harder or doing a little bit more due diligence because they may not want to make an assumption that because of the veracity of the amount, it agrees to what's in the audit that they have here.
But is, in your opinion, this might be an opinion question, is it fair, when do they ask for this exact piece of information? And I know that the council orders this audit, but the administration probably gets the emails asking for certain pieces of information. Does anyone get CC'd on that? The audit committee chair, anyone to know? I don't understand how if they thought this would need to be done for March or 30 days after the audit, how it can be expected to be ready. I don't know if we're being set up to fail here. And that's just what my question really is.
So the typical process on an audit prior to the year end is an engagement letter, which outlines what's going to be done. And then sometime after the fiscal year ends, maybe July or August, they'll send what they call a request list, a checklist. And I can't attest to if there's dates to it, what they're requesting, but as an audit procedure, it's sent out. And as it's usually sent or completed, they date when it comes out. And it's year over year. So probably the same request forms have been coming for multi-years. And they go to multi areas because we do have the school department has their own audit. So they'll probably get the same requests that would come that needs to be processed and submitted by a certain date. But again, we don't know what the request dates are or what they're requesting.
Okay, through the, Chair, I just wanted to ask Councilman Ferry something. Can I ask him something, Council President?
Through the chair.
Through the chair. Councilman Ferry, I wasn't able to attend the audit committee meetings due to prior engagements for another job. Did the auditor ask for what they're saying they need now at the last meeting where they said they needed more time to get this done?
He said he's been asking for this information since the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members before I ask for a motion? Seeing none, I'll just follow up and say, looking forward to the audit, hopefully on January 23rd. We all want a thorough and complete audit. And that's what we're expecting to get. And then if it takes a few more weeks, it does, but I just want it done right and correct, and we can move on from that. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to continue the approval of the audit for FY 2022 to the January 23rd council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Just under discussion, I just want to say something. It's not even a vote for approval. It gets filed with the city clerk, but it does have to have a presentation given to the council. So we do need that on the agenda. You're gonna get the extension tomorrow from the Auditor General. So Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilman Marino,
Yes.
Councilwoman Renzulli,
Yes.
Councilman Campiano,
Yes.
Councilman Riley,
Yes.
Council Vice President Ferry,
Yes.
Council President Paplaskas.
Yes, one more thing before I call for a motion to adjourn. I see Mr. Balducci here, who's been patiently waiting at the last couple of meetings. Do you have anything that you want to add to this, or say on behalf of the school department or on the audit? We'll give you the last word, Mr. Balducci. Can you push the button so the green light comes on?
Thank you. Cranston Public Schools, like most school districts in Rhode Island, is centralized as far as how we handle grants. So I appreciate Mrs. Zanellis moving in that direction. I think that's a noteworthy effort. One of the other things as I offer a recommendation, we receive what we call standard grants, the title grants from the Department of Education, the IDEA grant, which is another grant that comes through the Department of Education. But there are instances where we receive other federal related grants that do require approval by the authoritative board, i.e. the school committee. So we place those on an agenda for approval at a school committee meeting. So that's just one more piece of evidence that gives us assurance that the grant has come through, it has been approved. And then basically my office works in conjunction with the grant director who oversees that particular grant to make sure everything is handled properly. So I think it just gives another layer of, assurance that all grants are identified and they're monitored correctly. So that's the only other suggestion I would make.
Thank you, Mr. Balducci. I see Director Moretti getting up in the corner of my eye. Do you have something to add? I was gonna give Mr. Balducci the last word.
I
but
know.
We'll go around one more time.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to respond to Councilwoman Marino. Checked with Mike Igo, basically saying the process has been decentralized for the last 20 years or so. They've had the same audit comment for at least 10 years. And the reply has been consistent pending staffing. If we were able to get staffing, that we would centralize the function. Obviously, Mr. Zidelis is taking action since he's come on. So it's been a couple of decades that it's been this way, to Mike's recollection.
Thank you, Director Moretti. Councilwoman Renzulli.
Thank you. To that point, Director Marty, we have a grant writer, but we don't have a grant administrator. Mr. Balducci, you have someone who brings in the grants and then they manage them. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? Are they drawing down? Are they keeping track of all the reports? The same grant writer?
So
And is it safe to say that the city of Cranston itself does not have that's not a position that all falls under, with everything else? Is that correct?
Through the chair to the counselor, there is not a dedicated person in finance that will follow this. So what I'm trying to do is streamline the operation with a centralized repository, a shared workbook, which both the department has access to, the grant receiving department, and the finance department is one of the ideas as a stopgap measure until we have the means to put in place a position that will monitor this.
So is it safe to say that the schools maybe has this, under control because they have a specific person who's doing the job?
Through the chair, having an individual assigned exclusively to this is what I had in the city of Worcester. And quite honestly, it gives assurances to both the people in the finance office as well as the auditors, because you're not taking someone, haphazard to reconstruct something. The person who did the financial filings is there compiling the CFR, which makes it substantially more accurate and more efficient.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
One last thing. I just want to ask the clerk to put audit update. We have a finance meeting before the council meeting next month, correct?
Yes, correct.
It's meeting just for an update on the audit process.
Okay,
So we can maybe know that we're going to get the audit
on the
at the
20th.
council meeting. So just a reminder on the finance meeting. Thank you.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Happy New Year.
That's a wrap. Happy.